Hello, welcome back. Thank you to Peter Greenberg and his panel. And we now turn to health, dealing with COVID-19 and how we restore travelers' trust and confidence to rebuild business. What is the new normal? How do we learn to live, travel, work, and play despite COVID-19? Now, obviously, yesterday's news about the Pfizer vaccine will be uppermost in people's minds when it comes to health, and I want to get people's reactions to that. And don't forget, to all our delegates watching, please have some questions for us. The box is there. We've got a great panel here, so your questions are very welcome. On this panel, we have Professor David Heymann, who's Professor of Infectious Disease Epidemiology, it's hard to say, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and he's the head of the Centre of Global Health Security at Chatham House and the chair of the WHO Advisory Group on Emergencies. We have Simon Vincent, who is President Europe of Middle East and Africa for Hilton, which includes 549 hotels and across 13 brands and nearly 70 countries and territories. We have Filipe Silva, board member of Turismo de Portugal. We have Ambassador Young-Shim from South Korea. And we have Tom Jones, who's a senior partner at Finn Partners, who's got vast experience from both from healthcare in the travel and the communications and PR perspectives. And we have, coming up, Angus Urquhart, who's going to make a short presentation about rapid testing. But first, I want to turn to the doctor in the house, if that's okay, to our distinguished medical expert, David. Let me turn to you and ask you about your thoughts on restoring trust and global considerations. But even before we get to that, I have to ask you, the news yesterday, is it a potential game changer or are we getting too excited?
Well, thanks, Rajan. I think it is a game changer eventually, but we have to understand more about that vaccine. Right now, we know that it's a vaccine which has prevented illness. Has that prevented infection as well, or just has it prevented serious illness? That's one question that has to be sorted out. And also we have to understand how long protection will last. And in addition, we need to understand whether or not this vaccine requires a booster dose and how often it might require a booster dose. So many things not yet understood. How effective is it in the elderly? And so we'll begin to understand that as time goes on. So it is a breakthrough. It's very important, but we have to remember that this disease appears to be becoming endemic, which means it will remain with us over a long period of time. I chair a group at WHO, as you said, Rajan, and we're trying to help WHO begin to develop a risk assessment framework that countries can use when they decide on where they want to open up their travel. And that, of course, will depend on countries being able to say, we have identified countries that have an equal risk of infection to us and an equal capacity to respond to that risk. Right now, the risk framework that people or countries are using includes the numbers of cases reported by WHO. And this is a very poor indicator because the number of cases is only the number of positive tests that a country has, depending on the testing strategy they use. Some countries only test people going into hospital, others test people who are in the community. So it's not a figure to use. Better figures are hospital admissions, deaths, contact tracing effectiveness, others, and those will be in this WHO framework, which we will review next week with WHO. This last week, I had a chance to participate in a regional conference of the International Civil Aviation Organization in Asia. And in that conference, two things became very clear. Airlines and other groups are really doing the maximum that they can to make safe travel, and they're succeeding in that. Travel is safe. So travel is one aspect that needs to be taken into account. Air travel is now shown to be safe. Airlines are doing what they need. But countries are now trying to decide, can we replace or shorten the quarantine or the self-isolation that require people when they come into our country? And what role will testing strategies provide in that? And how do we make sure that they have insurance going forward? So clearly a vaccine would be the best to say this person has been vaccinated, but that would have to be a guarantee that the vaccination certificate is not false and the vaccine has been
I need
effective,
password.
not a counterfeit vaccine.
I see.
At the same time, countries need to be moving ahead now with good testing strategies. We know, for example, in last week's meeting, that if testing strategies are correct, if a person is tested before traveling and then upon arrival in a country and is negative both times, even if that person is not in quarantine, there's a 40% decrease in imported disease. So there are many testing strategies, and I know you have a lecture on them later on, which will help to determine what is the best strategy moving forward. But certainly that will include testing and trying to decrease the amount of time that people have to self-isolate. Thank you, Rajan, and back to you.
Thank you very much, David. It won't be so much a lecture, I don't think. I think it's just a short presentation, but appreciate your comments, and please stick around because obviously your expertise will be very useful in everything that we talk about now. Let's go then to the issue of rapid testing and to Angus Urquhart, who is the sales director at GeneMe UK, who are a distributor of the Frank D, let me get that right, test kit. It's a rapid and highly specific test kit for COVID-19. Angus, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us more.
Thank you very much indeed, Rajan, and thanks very much, everybody. I shall just share my screen. Okay. Right, here we are, guys. Okay, what I'd like to do here is give you an overview, basically, of the tests that are available and the current testing landscape that exists when looking at testing for COVID-19, and then talk about some of the key factors that need to be considered when looking at using tests that can be effective. A critical factor when often talked about testing, particularly with travel, is that you have a trade-off between speed and accuracy. I mean, obviously, everybody is concerned to be able to have a test which can work quickly to be able to get people through, but at the same time, those tests have to be accurate. That is a really, really critical point, that if you don't have tests that are accurate enough, then the testing doesn't serve what it needs to do. And in fact, you'll be letting people through that are contagious with COVID and doesn't really solve the problem at all. So limited detection, or LOD, is a very, very critical point in deciding which tests can be used at which stage in the testing journey. There are broadly three types of tests that are being considered and are practical for use at the moment. There are antigen tests, or otherwise often known as rapid tests, which have had lots of press coverage recently. Those tests have an advantage in that they are very quick. However, they are not particularly accurate. They do not require lab processing, but they are not very good at picking up the virus in people that do not have symptoms. So their use is far better as, say, part of a government screening program when you're looking at people that have symptoms of COVID that are coming to find out whether they have it. Then you have RT-PCR, a test which is being used at the moment for most testing programs run by governments. That they're a very accurate test, but however, they're quite a slow test and they require a lab environment to run that test. So that has massive limitations upon what can be done in terms of mass screening. Then you have RT-LAMP tests. They do not require a lab process. They're also very good at finding virus in people. In many cases, they're as accurate as PCR testing, but they do not have to be carried out in a laboratory setting. Therefore, that gives you the advantage to be able to test at points of care. This chart here is a particularly useful one in that it really gives an example of the life cycle of the virus, shows when people have symptoms, when their symptoms onset. It talks about when a carrier is likely to be contagious, and it also very clearly shows at which point different types of tests are usable in that environment. For the purposes of looking at aviation and travel, it's very, very important to be using a test that picks up people who are asymptomatic, and therefore it's really RT-PCR and RT-LAMP are the two types of tests that are able to do that in an accurate manner. These are just some standards it's important to look out for, but particularly it's very important to note that World Health Organization gold standard tests are the best tests that really should be that should be utilized in an environment for testing, particularly in an aviation setting. GeneMe UK, in partnership with Yoti, has a solution basically that allows airports and airlines to rapidly test colleagues and passengers with accurate results being securely delivered to their mobile devices within 30 minutes in a GDPR-compliant manner, which is obviously a very important part of the process as well to adhere to GDPR. The Frank test is a nucleic acid amplification test. It has very high accuracy, specificity of 100% and sensitivity of 97%. The testing cycle is only 30 minutes. It's as accurate as PCR testing, but allows you to have on-site testing. It is WHO gold standard, and it can pick up asymptomatic carriers, which is vitally important in this space. It has a price point that can range between £25 to £6.50 per test, depending on volumes and testing types. It's a very straightforward process. People enter the airport or area they're being tested. They are swabbed. The swab is then put into a tube, which buffer solution is added to. The results are then sent to the individual's phone via the Yoti app within 30 minutes, which can then be shown to whoever is checking on security to allow the person access to the area. That's an example of what it would look like when shown to security. And this is also particularly relevant to talk about, which is pool testing, which is something that we're developing, Frank's in partnership with Yoti. This gives you the ability to have that throughput, which is vitally important in a travel environment. Essentially, you swab up to 6 people at any one time. It could be a family of 4, it could be 6 individuals. That goes into one tube, which then the solution is added to. It runs through the machine, and you get results. Where the result comes back negative, all 6 people pass through the journey. Where it comes back positive, you retest those 6 people. This gives you an ability, essentially, to be able to increase your throughput quite substantially. To give you an example, one standard 96-well PCR machine would be able, on a 16-hour shift, to process over 20,000 people. So with a number of machines in an airport setting or a travel setting, you'd be able to process quite large numbers of people, essentially. Frank has been involved in a variety of places. We reopened the first theatre show in the UK, Sleepless in Seattle, that took place after the lockdown by testing cast and crew. We've been involved in testing at Heathrow Airport, all part of the trials, and we're currently working with Virgin Atlantic and with a variety of other airports and aviation partners across the world. So we're very involved in the aviation space and actually have a specialist aviation team to help us work on this. And at that point, I shall say thank you very much and goodbye, because I have reached my 5 minutes. So thank you very much.
Angus, I just want to come back to you on one point, which is it's all very well and good having something like this, which does seem very effective. But unless it's adopted by all airports really pretty well around the world, and there's a uniformity and there's agreement about it, it's not going to be much use, is it? Because you need to have that consensus. Absolutely right, yeah. Completely correct. And that's obviously something that governments around the world are working on to come up with obviously you've probably seen the Common Pass using W3C technology. The guys at Yoti are very involved in those conversations. Well, from what our understanding is that there are groups that are working on having a number of these health passports that are all approved by governments that can be acceptable to countries around the world. Then obviously you have to have agreement on the type of tests that are used. We have sign-off from various different governments, and we are working on getting sign-off from the UK government and working with the Scottish government as well to have that approval to be able to have a national. But as you correctly say, you have to have a global standard which is acceptable in all places, and that's something we're very actively involved in making sure that we're part of. Thank you, Angus. I'm going to turn to the individual countries in a second, but before that, we've got a question from Hiwatle and Bia to David, and I think he's probably the best person to answer this. It's basically, what is the plan to work under the COVID-19 situation for Africa, aside of using the protocol of WHO? Do you understand what the point is there?
I'm not sure I understand. I think what's being asked, well, I don't know for sure. What I do know is that there's great concern, as you said, Angus, earlier, that there be a standardization throughout the world and that there be a certification that the tests are really valid tests. I think all countries will be striving toward that, including African countries. But, you know, I just would add that it's wonderful to have this system in place, but the major disincentive is going to be the quarantine on the other side. And so that has to be worked on at the same time in order that people don't get into a country, even though they're negative, get locked down because they haven't had a test they have to have a test in a future 5 days or so. So I think all of this has to work hand in hand. Over.
Thank you, David. Okay, let's turn to a country, and that is Portugal, which was doing so well for so long, in a sense, relatively a success story within Europe, and the cases were low relatively. But yesterday, Filipe, I believe the country announced a relative quarantine, or relative curfew at least, a lockdown, I suppose. Filipe, can you tell me more?
Well, warm greetings to all of you, Rajan. It's a pleasure to be here. Warm greetings from Portugal. Definitely, we are facing a second wave, quite a significant second wave in Portugal, and we are tackling this pandemic problem as carefully as possible. Let me just share, if it's possible, and I will just go through some of the information that I would like to share with you. Hopefully you're able to see.
Yep.
Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, okay. Let me just go quickly through. So we need to be facing that tourism sector is one of the most resilient sectors across the board and throughout the last few decades, in spite of all political, economical, health problems that we've been having. Still, we've been facing a significant strong in this sector. So this is something that it needs to be bear in mind. Back in 2019, according to UN WTO, we had 7% of global exports, 1 out of 10 jobs worldwide was in tourism, a growth of 4%, and 1.5 billion arrivals, international billion arrivals reached in 2019. The Guardian mentioned earlier this year that according to what Portugal was doing, all the different projects, definitely this was an important showcase on making tourism a force for good. So this is a very important slogan and message that needs to be across the board at a worldwide level. So being tourism a force for good. What happened was that, unfortunately, we could not predict that what was happening in China by the end of 2019 was quickly spreading to Asia, Europe, becoming a pandemic problem, and of course reflecting tourism-wise and not having business at all. So the world was closed for business tourism-wise. So a lot of issues regarding trust, lack of trust and confidence from the consumer side, from the trading perspective, from the investment perspective as well. The urgency of fighting the spreading, the urgency of having a good coordination in terms not only at the national level, but also between countries in terms of tackling uncertainty, the lack of information, and of course, managing the health priorities and economical priorities. So we had definitely to get ready, and we in Portugal got ready. Just a few examples of the work that we have been doing, and the strong commitment from the public and private sector in terms of reinstating confidence and trust and complying with the health and safety measures. So strong investment, over 20,000 companies in Portugal are reinstating these clean and safe stamp that has been implemented in Portugal, training, doing a strong effort in training their staff, providing information to their customers, instating protocols for cleaning and disinfection, investing in equipment, and of course, instating operational procedures. At the communication level, our hashtag Can't Skip Portugal was temporarily replaced by the hashtag Can't Skip Hope, while we were preparing as a country in order to welcome every single tourist on a safe way. So when we felt that we were fully ready in order to welcome tourists again, we replaced the hashtag with the Can't Skip opening, showcasing what Portugal was doing. So this is just an image that reflects what happened throughout this summer. So we had some business tourism-wise, but a lot of people that were trying to find more secluded, more remote places away from the most crowded places. So, but this is not the work that of a single destination, a single country. This is a work that is being done across the board worldwide at a national level, at a regional level, in order to reinstate the trust and confidence from the consumer side and from the tourism side. So what we see here is, of course, two different areas that needs to be brought together. The health authorities, the tourism authorities and partners, they both have their priorities, but they need to combine all efforts in order to reinstate this confidence from the consumer side and from the trading side. So from the health department, they need to bear in mind that we need to have more mobility, and from the tourism side, we need to have more business, but also preventing the spreading of the virus. So it's all about providing a safe and seamless experience for people that are traveling nowadays, trying to prevent the spreading of the virus and learning, of course, about the disease, especially with the mobility. And how do we get it? Just a couple of slides in order to share this, the urgency of having harmonized travel measures, consistent national approaches, replacing quarantines by testing on departure. And Angus was very clear on his presentation about the complexity about the testing. Having a common EU testing protocol, having a common EU passenger locator form, coordinated and interoperable tracing apps, developing pilot programs between countries and regions, and of course, reinstating surveillance protocols for the future. So what we will get with this data is crucial on this matter based on mobility and being comparable. We will get also improved safety, understanding where the risk is, and improved protocols and procedures. And of course, not last but not the least, free movement. So it's more about combining the health and tourism priorities rather than having each of them their own priorities. This needs to be done at the national and international level by all stakeholders on the health side and also on the tourism side. European Travel Commission, IATA, WTTC, UNWTO, destinations, airlines, airports, hotels, all different partners in order to restart tourism again, like UNWTO states, and of course, making tourism not only a force for good, but also for health. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Filipe. Just before we turn to the ambassador in South Korea, I just want to go to hospitality and how the protocols, the new protocols, will create trust for travelers, and if they're not already doing so, in reducing fear. So I will turn to Simon from Hilton. Simon, how do you do that? How have you been dealing with the crisis? How have you been reassuring guests that everything is safe and healthy?
Good morning, Rajan. Good morning, everybody. Listen, just a little bit of context for those not familiar with the Hilton business. We're 6,300 hotels operating in 110 countries, and we've got a further 2,500 plus in the pipeline under construction. So a very sizable business. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 60% of our global network closed. We're now broadly 85% plus open. But clearly, we've got different countries at different stages of evolution regarding COVID as it relates to lockdown, curfews, and travel restrictions. So our Q2, frankly, was pretty much key worker and quarantine business, and we had to pivot our business to support that activity. And with that came a lot of hygiene and safety protocols. And we've used that experience working very closely with governments and with hospital authorities in many countries to actually help shape a lot of the government's protocols and regulations as we've moved forward. Now, Q2 was pretty much the height of the coronavirus, as I said, from our point of view. Q3, actually, we saw the start of the return of leisure business first, Our resorts were very busy. Our regional hotels were busy. Clearly, a lot of pent-up demand from consumers, but they need confidence. And our approach to that was giving them absolute flexibility on booking conditions so that they could book with us in confidence, but also launching a couple of initiatives such as Clean Stay, whereby we partnered with Reckitt Bannister and their Lysol and Dettol products, and we've introduced enhanced cleaning procedures in the hotels. We've also launched Event Ready, which is hybrid and virtual meeting capability, very similar to this. And we've had a number of trials of that have been very successful around the world, whereby you've got maybe meetings with 30, 40, 50 people physically present in a room, but thousands of people actually hooked in on the phone. So I think that's going to evolve our business quite considerably over the coming years. I think that all those initiatives and all those measures will only take our occupancy up to a certain level. There's no question about that. Although we are seeing a strong recovery in somewhere like China, where we're 70% occupancy now, but it's fair to say, UK is still running around about 35%. Continental Europe is, low 40% in occupancy terms. And if we are going to get back to where we were previously, we're going to have to see confidence return into business travelers. That does ultimately require extensive, rapid and reliable testing on departure and arrivals, supported by effective contact tracing skills. As somebody said already, this is likely to be an endemic disease, and it's something we're going to have to live with. So we're optimistic. I think there's huge pent-up demand. I think we've seen that, the way in which our business has increased quarter on quarter. But it's fair to say we've taken a little bit of a step back. I don't think it's going to be a straight line to recovery here. But we've proved that we can reshape our business. And one of the other key things I think that it's done is actually accelerated the digitalization of our business in many ways, in terms of the customer journey. And now you can pre-book your room, choose your room, check in physically, check out physically using your iPhone. Also pre-order amenities using iPhone technology. Physically unlock your room key. So all these high touch areas that were previously a potential impediment to travel, I think, become that much more seamless. So, hospitality is a great industry. We'll continue to evolve. We're confident that, we've got the business model to pull through this. It's just a question of hanging in there right now, and then looking forward to when we have a vaccine and we've got reliable and rapid testing.
Simon, just thank you very much. Just one quick question back to you, which is, across the world, from region to region, do you notice a difference in attitudes amongst people in terms of how much they want hygiene and safety, how demanding they are?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's interesting. I look after Europe, Middle East and Africa. We've got three principal regions, but I think there's a pretty consistent approach to all of this. I mean, a lot of the programs that we've launched are global programs. Most of our customers are asking, for the sorts of things that we're putting in place. Most of our business partners are demanding it on the business travel side. Hygiene has always been table stakes in many ways. I think it's now just an enhanced focus on that. And so I think anything that can give reassurance to customers to start traveling again is a positive. And, I think, we've seen a pretty consistent approach across the globe.
And equally importantly, your staff. You're holding on to as many of them as you can. They're safe too.
Yeah, no, look, we've got, clearly a critical stakeholders in our staff. We've got 400 plus thousand team members on a global basis. And, we are absolutely trying to hold on to them. We've been lobbying very hard with governments on their behalf to support jobs and the job support schemes that have been going on. And, they have been doing an amazing job in very difficult circumstances. And there's some truly inspirational stories from our hotels in the way in which they've risen to the challenge and supported customers and indeed supported governments in making sure that, we can provide a hospitable service to them.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'm going to ask Tom in a second about perception and about customers and consumers and how they feel about hygiene and safety. But before that, let's just get to our ambassador in South Korea. Now, obviously, South Korea has been consistently praised for by the international community for its handling of the coronavirus situation. Tell us why you think it has worked so well, Ambassador. Is the ambassador there? I suspect she may have disappeared temporarily. We'll come back to her if she arrives. Tom, let's turn to you. We've talked before about this. In terms of perception, how do you persuade people traveling anywhere that their journey is going to be safe, their stay is going to be safe? Is it just a question of having the right protocols and the right hygiene measures, blah, 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 or is it more than that?
I think it's more than that. And first of all, Rajan, thank you very much for the question. Thanks very much. It's great to see you again, and it's an honor to be among so many of you. But I think I think that when you look at what the best countries are doing, and you want to think about what it is that they're doing to reassure travelers, it's the employment of data and science, it's the technology, it's the different types of protocols that they're putting in place. But what's underlying all of that is effective communications. And that's what we do here at Fin Partners. And that's part of our global travel and recovery network that we've developed, because just like so many of these travel destinations, they've had to innovate, and they're sort of thinking through things while we're also trying to standardize processes. And thanks to the WTTC and the great work that they're doing, it's helped, and it's helped inform. But when you look at those countries that are doing things really well, what I think you see happening is the merger of technology, health and wellness, and travel and tourism. I mean, how often do you have at this conference, Rajan, an epidemiologist, Dr. Heymann, joining us? I mean, how often does that happen? It's the cross section of these things which are so important now, because what I like to say is communications is oxygen. It reduces anxiety when you have good data matching up with the interests of prospective travelers. So when you look at destinations like Jamaica, it's done a very effective job with, putting in policies in their sort of travel zones where they have between Milk River and Negril, businesses there getting training from the country on, what are good policies. And the Jamaica Cares program that Talib just spoke about in the session before us, which I'm grateful to him for doing. Rapid testing is really the key, I think, also in terms of informing what that strategy looks like. So I'm really grateful to Angus for educating all of us, not only on the technology that he represents, but also in general what that looks like. And his company certainly is a thought leader in this space, not just producing their own, but informing the public on what it is. And I think that that's what these things combine to do. Science and technology combining to create a heightened mental security in traveling, and that's what's needed to persuade folks.
You referred to the Caribbean and Latin America, and there is an element there of having numerous testing, multiple testing, 3 times sometimes during a trip. Now,
yeah, Bahamas 3 times. That's exactly right.
Now, is that a good thing? Is that good, or is that? Do you think that
well, right now I think it is. I think right now it's really important because, like I said, it's not so much just getting tested. It's how we're communicating around these things, and it's really important that we're informing and giving people greater reassurances. It's not just so much about persuading; it's doing the right thing. How are we keeping people safe? And I think that that's an important development that's going to take shape even after this is over, ahead of us, is how are we making sure that we're in the safety and health and wellness of prospective travelers coming to different destinations. I think standardization is going to be critical to that. You mentioned the 3 times over testing in Bahamas, but Costa Rica is doing the same thing. They're also requiring medical insurance to ensure these types of things, which is not something that everyone has and is really important. We talked about Jamaica. I think that these things all through Caribbean and Latin America, and I think that they're doing a lot. And again, a lot of this is through the guidance of the WTTC safe travel certifications that are being required. But I think it's a very good thing.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom, for this for a second. We do now have the ambassador from South Korea back with us. I wonder if you can tell us exactly why you think South Korea has been so effective. You have got urban areas which are very compact and densely populated, and yet it seems you've done well really in relatively keeping the COVID down. Can you explain to us what you think has worked?
Thank you. I think we did well because whole world says we did well, and I think we never had a lockdown, complete lockdown from the day one. When it all happened in China, we were really scared because we just shared the boundary with the China. But then the most important thing is, I think there was consensus built within us citizens. Yes, we do it together because we don't leave anyone behind. We just have to cooperate because this special, the coronavirus 19 attacks anyone, everyone. So when government came up with, please wear a mask, that's the best thing you could have until vaccine is developed, invented, discovered. Second is keep social distance. And we'd follow that. And then when we went to any hotel, public place, any place, they would check mask and they would check our temperature. So if temperature is any higher than 37.5, which is in centigrade, we just turned back and no one argued about that. And then after that, when it became really the coronavirus was not under control, then we started to write down our identify. We show our identification so that if anything happens, that government can step in, contact us. And of course, we are most wired country of the world. We had a mobile phone. But let me tell you, my own experience, it happened a week ago. I belong to 2 5-star hotel. Hilton is not one of those, so don't worry. But I went this Friday afternoon. We go health facilities, exercise and this. I came, and then Monday night, Friday and the Monday night, I got information coming in by mobile phone and from hotel saying, look, we want you to go and take a test. So why? They found out one person turned out to be positive, and she visited at that hour from 2:30 to 5 o'clock. She spent, so anybody who were there at that facility for 2.5 hours were informed, and we would be informed 10 times. So I went Monday to the health organization owned by the government. You get tested for free. And I asked them, how long does it take for the return? 1 to 2 days. Well, I couldn't afford the 1 to 2 days because I'm hosting another webinar tomorrow, and I had to, if something wrong with me, I have to find someone else to replace me. So then they said, why don't you go to private hospital? So I went, and they had a drive-through. So I don't have to touch anything, do anything, and drive through. The only difference was I had to pay about $100 versus nothing by the government. It's $100. And then what they did was they gave me the result within 3 hours. And meanwhile, believe me, 3 hours until I get, negative, there were almost 50 questions. The messages coming from authority, health authority. Where are you? Are you there? Have you tested? And did you get results? So really, they really after you once you are grouped. So that's what I think did. And then doing this, perhaps Westerners, people from Western society say, well, intrusion of privacy, and we say, well, hell with the privacy, if you're sick, you're sick. And it's not only you're sick, you're killing all your people around you, your best, your loved ones. So we were willing to take sacrifice. And now this is a last comment. The government is going to charge $100 if you don't carry mask from 13th of November. 2 days from now, they will charge $100. And do we argue? No, we don't argue. So to us, from our perspective, it's so difficult to watch. President of the United States says, please wear the mask, or please don't wear the mask. Mask is not an issue. So we have to listen to this health authority. If you don't listen to health authority, I think alternative is lockdown.
Thank you, Ambassador. That's so interesting. And let me turn back to you then, Tom, because there we're talking about almost like a national character, or a belief in just going with the right thing to do according to what the government's saying, as opposed to, as the Ambassador said, an invasion of privacy, perhaps an intrusion. You've had the demonstrations in the States. You've had kind of rebellions, if you like, across Europe. Do you think that's key to all this?
Look, you're a gifted reporter, Rajan. I am not going to be baited into a political discussion. You and I could discuss that over a pint in London one day when I'm back over across the pond. But coronavirus belongs to no political party. Let's just be crystal clear on that. And the best way to deal with it is the science, the data, and let that inform the technology, the innovations, and the communications, because that's really what's at stake here. It's not about the protests, although the protests may be super spreader events we're learning, right? The rallies and those types of things. That's more of a scientific standpoint. I'm not speaking from a political as to what those folks stand for. Everybody should be able to speak their mind, but do it safely. And I think that that's where, but I do agree with the point about the mask wearing and being consistent, because I think that comes back to communications, and it comes back to standardizing policies that countries can use, and, working with the WTTC to really express the importance of things like mask wearing, contact tracing, social distancing. Those are just a few of the things that are happening, but like, how are those technologies and best practices being employed? I think that's what's most important here, and making sure that communications is effectively used to educate folks systematically and consistently to really stop the spread of this virus.
Thank you very much. My intention was not to bait you into
I know.
That's a good point. However, and yes, we will have a pint to discuss all that when all
another time.
Thank you very much indeed to my distinguished panel. Fantastic to hear from all of you. Time, as ever, is really short, but that has been so illuminating. Everybody's contribution, very, very useful indeed. Thank you so much.